Welcome all to Histographia, where we discuss ancient secrets, medieval legends, and modern history.
All right, well, let's get started. We're going to talk a little bit about my trip to Egypt.
Yes, I'm very anxious to hear. Very excited.
Right, so earlier this month, I went to Egypt for 2 weeks on a trip with the YouTuber Megalithic Marvels. He's done podcasts for quite a few years. He has, I think, just under 300,000 YouTube subscribers, which is a significant amount.
That's a pretty big number.
Yeah, and I know he has a huge Instagram following too, which is kind of where I bumped into him.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So to give a little bit of preface as to why I went to Egypt, especially with more of an obscure historian kind of guy, I'm a big Younger Dryas guy. Mm-hmm. I listen to Randall Carlson almost religiously, right? And I also listen to other people and other podcasts and YouTubers that talk about the Younger Dryas. And what kept it reappearing on my radar, if you will, or on my little map of world monuments spanning back to before this great cataclysm, Egypt always appears. And you would think, well, in our textbooks it tells us, the dynasty started approximately 5,000 or 6,000 years ago, 6,000 being like very, very early.
Yeah, ballpark.
Right. And so we have this kind of neat ordering of history, right? Everything starts with the Sumerians, and then it goes over to Egypt and then Greece and then Rome, and then, of course, us. Obviously we're next in
the
line.
end point in all history.
Right. And so I've been challenging that idea for about a year and a half now, since I had a job where I could listen to podcasts for 15 hours a day. So Egypt reappearing led me to this trip, if you will. It just kind of showed up on my feed, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to put the money down now while I have it to go on this trip, because if I don't do it now, I just will never do it.
I'm so glad you did.
Oh, I am too. I had no vested interest in Egypt whatsoever. I've never really studied it beyond like 6th grade social studies. And honestly, it was a life-changing trip. And I do have to say, though, from the minute my plane landed in Cairo to the minute that I left and took off once again to leave, everything was taken care of. This was a class act on behalf of not only Derek from Megalithic Marvels, but also Mohammed Ibrahim, who was our guide. And he's a real accredited Egyptologist that we had with us. So that already put him leagues above all the other tour guides that would just take you to the sites and just kind of either make up some BS or, just tell you kind of vaguely what these places are. I mean, he sits there with his academic credentials and challenges a lot of what he learned and of what is being said in both like the museums and on those placards and in textbooks, right? But overall, a great class act. I mean, we had no worries. All of our meals were already planned. All of our hotel stays were already planned. All of our events were planned. We didn't necessarily maintain our itinerary all that well, but it was to our benefit when we changed things. It wasn't because of an inconvenience. It was because, hey, we'll have the opportunity to go here by ourselves.
So we will.
Right. And so we'll just spend the morning doing nothing, relaxing, and then in the afternoon we'll actually go when the site is closed. Because our last day when we were back in Cairo and went to the Giza Plateau, we were completely alone at the Great Pyramid. We had complete full access to the inside. We went up to that King's Chamber, we went into the Queen's Chamber, and we went all the way underneath the pyramid. Right.
It's just so cool.
Not a single soul outside of our group was there. And I felt so unqualified to be there. The people that I was with, I mean, a lot of people just like also follow Derek and Megalithic Marvels. But I mean, there were, like I said, we had an Egyptologist, we had geologists, we had stone workers, things like that. Here I am, I just watch videos on YouTube and I went.
It's kind of a miracle as to just the internet and the modern world now that you can, hey, I like what you do. Can I join?
Yeah. And
It's so cool.
yeah, it was really, really great experience, and I'm glad I went. For those of you out there, he's going to do this trip every year. It seems, and it's always going to be in May. They want to try to keep that same schedule. From what I can tell, in 2024, it's the exact same dates.
Yeah.
And then he also is doing a Peru trip every year, and that falls in October.
Yes.
Right, and there's one this year, but I can't do two big trips in the same
Right.
year. Not only because of financial reasons, but I work, so
Yeah.
I can't be taking that many
All
days
that
off
time.
work all the time. But I definitely will be going in 2024 to Peru. And I mean, it's been a dream of mine to be able to go travel in Latin America.
Right.
But anyhow, back to Egypt. There's three main things that I wanted to talk about that are super significant to me. And it's not to demean any of the other things that we did, right? It's just like, I don't know, once you see one giant limestone block, all of them just kind of, okay, whatever.
They blend together.
Yeah, the fact that, they're they're multi-ton stones, weighing more than several cars, and they were all
Right.
put in place, like, you get bewildered at that, right? So you look at the pyramid on documentaries and things, and you go, oh, wow, those are large stones. I wonder how they got them there. And then you show up, and you actually walk to the base of the pyramid, and you're like, holy crap, these are massive stones.
Right.
How in the world did they get those here?
That's what we were just talking about. The film and TV, it just doesn't convey the sheer scale of some of these things.
Right. And it was really cool, but after a while, like, the big stones are just kind of like, everything's a big stone. So there's three real things that stood out to me that just kind of blew me away, right? And I'll talk about these when I go on Derek's podcast, Megalithic Marvels, tomorrow. So the first thing for me would have been the Serapeum, right? And the Serapeum is a catacomb-like structure where you go underneath the bedrock, right? You enter through these nice stairs, and there's a nice little entranceway. And you go in, and you walk down these corridors that are, rounded, at the top and everything. But they're only maybe a few wingspans long for, the average adult male, right? They're not that wide. They're not relatively wide for what is contained within them.
Right.
Because within the Serapeum, there are 20, I think it's 23 or 24, but at least 20 of these giant granite stone boxes that measure 2 meters tall, 2 meters wide, and then the third dimension is like 4 meters. And they have a lid that goes down on top of them, which is massively heavy, and it's actually designed with a lip so that it permanently seals itself in there. And you have to think, okay, this box with the lid weighs approximately 60 tons, right? And on the inside, it's completely smooth, like it's polished. The corners are perfect 90-degree angles, right? And the depth of the inscriptions are completely uniform, right? So it wasn't like somebody just chiseled away and, that image, that gets the gist of it. I mean, it's like you could almost get the same quality when you 3D print something, right? Wow. It's just uniform depth and just precision all the way around, right? And my first thought was, how in the world did they move these? Because these granite and diorite and basalt boxes come from many, many, many miles away, right? And so they were carved elsewhere, possibly carved in the area where they reside now, but I highly doubt it. A lot of things in Egypt were carved at these quarries and shipped as finished product, right? And so my first thought was, how in the world did they get these giant boxes down here? Because have you ever moved furniture through a house? And you have to think about this. You have to move a sofa not only down a bunch of stairs but into a doorway and then immediately make a 90-degree turn, and then the breadth of the corridor is barely wide enough to carry some of these boxes. I shouldn't say barely. I mean, there's enough where you could get men on the sides, but you can only fit so many men around an object as you're trying to move it.
And then pivoting in there.
Yeah, pivoting it in and then lowering it once again to get into its final resting place, which is completely centered in each of these small areas, right? Which all carved out of bedrock. And so you're thinking, oh yeah, well, I guess we could do that if we were like really careful and shimmied our way down. Yeah, but then you forget it's 60 tons.
Right. It's already hard enough lifting something that's 100 pounds, 200 pounds, 60 tons.
Yeah, like the box itself is 40, and then the lid is like another 20. And so after that thought, my second thought was, okay, well, what were these used for? Right? And form and function is something that I kept thinking over and over again while in Egypt. Okay, because if you want something to be functional, it doesn't have to be that aesthetic.
Yeah.
But when these things are not only functioning as something, they have the time to make it aesthetic. Like, okay, this is like a significant piece in their collection, if you will. So some of them had inscriptions on them. I wasn't able to go down and look at every single one. Actually, we only went down and actually touched one because the rest of them aren't even open.
Right.
Their little display or exhibits aren't open for you to walk down in. There's only one or two that do that. And so we walk down and we, touch one. There's inscriptions all over it. Some of them are kind of, cheap, like scratches of the surface. They're not very good. But others are quite, like serious inscriptions on these. And without knowing the culture or even how to translate hieroglyphs, I can't even begin to tell you what these things possibly said. But one of the main missions of this trip was to demonstrate to people that there are things in Egypt older than the dynastic periods. That there are things that were created before the Younger Dryas impact boundary. So we're talking 10,000 years old, which is like a huge number. There's a huge gap between, 12,800 to 11,600 years ago, right? And then, boom, maybe 5,000 years ago. So there's like a 5,000 or 6,000, almost 7,000 year gap in that time frame. And you're thinking, well, how would we even possibly know? And so that's where I kind of, that's where it kept popping up on my radar. Why Egypt kept showing up for me was because they keep talking about this Younger Dryas and, the major floods and things that wiped out entire civilizations, and that we've lost almost any trace of these. But at any rate, anytime you see granite in Egypt or basalt or granite diorite, or just diorite plainly, these things have, the Mohs scale, right? Is the Mohs scale of hardness, right? Those aforementioned stones have a hardness level of like 8, 9, right? And we're led to believe that the dynastic Egyptians made all these and they had copper tools.
The math ain't mathing on that.
Right, because copper has a 3.
Right.
And so I'm sitting there going, okay, well, maybe as technology got better, that they would have used it. But it's quite the contrary all throughout Egypt, that the later periods have less and less art and they're able to do less and less. I mean, the pyramids were built like before everything else.
Right.
Like, that's what's crazy to me.
It's something that we were talking about.
Yeah, the big stuff was made before anything else. All the little things came after. Like, the Greeks couldn't build it, the Romans couldn't build it, and the dynastic Egyptians couldn't do it. And, like, I keep saying, I think I mentioned this earlier today, either while we were recording or before. I said 3 dynasties. There's not 3 dynasties. There's like 30-something of them. But there's 3 kingdoms.
Right.
And, they claim everything was made in, like, the third kingdom has the best stuff, the second kingdom has okay stuff, and the first kingdom has, like, the worst stuff, And that's not the case. The oldest stuff is the best stuff, and everything else after that is, like, decadence.
Interesting.
Degenerate.
Every civilization goes through the throes of decadence.
Yeah, exactly.
Easter egg there.
And so okay, they have a form. Like they're these beautiful, ornate, carved boxes, right?
Mm.
The edges are smooth, rounded, and then the corners are sharp. And there's inscriptions on them, meaning that there was some sort of significance to it. And so when I asked Muhammad Ibrahim what they were, I kind of prefaced it with like my hypothesis. I said, if these were truly built by pre-dynastic or antediluvian or pre-diluvian, right? This is like kind of the terms they were using. I called it like pre-Younger Dryas impact groups, right? If pre-Younger Dryas impact groups built these, knowing that there's cataclysms happening, because it was a 1,200 year period of cataclysm. It wasn't just like an instant thing. And according to a lot of calendars and legends and stuff, things like this had happened before. So my thought was, did they build these boxes to store grains so that after the next disaster, these massive sturdy boxes can be opened and we have all the quote unquote genetic material. We have all of our agricultural plants. We can do everything all over again.
Just like the grain, the plant repository in Svalbard in Norway.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
Oh, yeah. That's what I equated it to. That's the first thing I thought. And, you know, we have these kind of things all around the world.
It's an interesting parallel.
Yeah, where we have these deposits of storage units. And then my thought was, oh, wow, maybe the Serapeum isn't the only place in Egypt where they like deliberately had boxes like buried. And mind you, none of these boxes had anything in them. Right. And one was blown up and they claimed that there was like a golden calf and all these kind of idols and stuff in it. But where are they? No one knows where these things are now. So, I mean, I understand there was a time when Egypt was basically just loot central. Like you could just go there and take anything you wanted.
Even then it was loot central.
Yeah. I mean, even, 100 years ago, it was still the case. Right. And so I imagine for many thousands of years. But a lot of these boxes, from what I understand, were not opened until very recently, till they could get machining in there to be able to do it, which, again, everything is just so narrow. But when I asked Muhammad Ibrahim that question, and I posed that idea to him, that these were quite possibly storage units, and, I wonder where else we could find them, he claimed that the electrical flow, or the like energies, if you will, that could pass through these boxes, they could quite possibly modify genetic material on the inside. And, okay, I don't know as much as he does, and, I thought it was an interesting take on that, but he agreed that they were for storage of those things, like precisely that. And so I was glad to see that, like, an Egyptologist, like an expert, because he's been trained in traditional textbook style Egyptology, and he also has his own ideas because of people like Dr. Robert Schoch and some other real professional guys that have come in and given him their opinion and things like that. And so that was the Serapeum, these massive, and they call them sarcophagi and stuff, but there was never even a person contained within one, or interned or whatever within one. And then, let's see, what other place was I thinking of? Oh, the Bent and Red Pyramids.
Oh, yes, yeah.
So these pyramids sit a little ways away from Cairo, maybe half-hour drive from Cairo. And these pyramids, not only because of their structure or that they're pyramids or that they're built out of giant stone blocks and that the blocks are... Okay, all right, I was going to gloss over this rather, but this is a pretty serious thing. On the Bent and Red Pyramids, you see that the slopes of them are perfect until, obviously, on the Bent Pyramid, they changed at the angle. But when you're looking at the stones, the surface of it is completely flat. And you're looking at the corners, and the corners are completely straight.
Right.
Perfect angle, both ways, right? When you actually look at the blocks themselves, the surface is flat and it's cut to a certain angle, but the top and bottom are as they were cut out of the quarry.
Right.
Meaning that at the quarry, they cut and customized this block, and then they basically like numbered it. And then the next block, which was, fit to it naturally, wherever the crack was, that's kind of like where they sent it.
Right.
It is also fit, like they fit perfectly together, even though they weren't cut.
Right.
They were only broken apart, not really cut.
Right.
And so in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, so not only did they cut these in a particular order and ship them in a particular order, but they basically had the pyramid already built at the quarry.
Right.
Like they must have understood where each piece was going.
And then shipped them in batches down the Nile.
Yeah.
Up the Nile, right?
Yes, up the Nile, I guess. Up, like,
North.
Downstream.
Yeah.
Downstream and north is also lower because of elevation.
Right.
But that would be interesting for some geographers out there.
There's some geographer somewhere who's just ripping his hair out.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, Upper Egypt is south.
Yes.
And Lower
the
Egypt
Upper Kingdom
is north.
and the Lower Kingdom.
Well, right. But okay, so I had to mention that just because it is kind of an odd thing, and it is
so cool.
It is a megalithic marvel, if you will.
Yeah.
So there's your shout out, Derek.
Full circle.
Full circle. But no, what I found really interesting at both the Bent and Red Pyramid are that there were these little glass-like shards surrounding the bases of these pyramids. I mean, and they were like scattered for hundreds of feet around the base of the pyramids. And I thought to myself, wow, like this would be really cool. And as I'm thinking, like, these were probably like connected to the side of the pyramid, making it super shiny. Muhammad himself said at one point these two pyramids were completely and uniformly covered in this glass-like material.
Right.
And he didn't know how to call it in English, right? And so we had some guys with us that are geologists, Dr. Allen and some other like stoneworkers and stuff too. And Allen said that this is calcite, which naturally forms in veins in limestone when it's exposed to groundwater after a certain time and stuff. And so my thought was, wow, if this was all exposed to water, or this is just a simple chemical reaction, right? That somehow, now this was my thought, that somehow the Egyptians had some sort of DIY geode crystal growth kind of kit that we do this today. We can grow crystals at home and do stuff. So this glass-like material that uniformly cut, and when I say uniformly, I'm not only talking about the whole surface was smooth. There were no like shards. They weren't like, it's not like a mosaic or anything. When I refer to smooth, it's not only that, but it's also like uniform depth. Like you could pick up so many different pieces and they all had the same thickness.
Yeah.
Right? Which to me said that maybe they were polishing this as well, which, that could quite possibly happen.
Right.
But I don't think that would have naturally happened as a chemical reaction, that it's all
that had to have been deliberate.
Yeah, so it was polished. Well, at the moment that I thought that, right, Muhammad Ibrahim said that these were all uniformly covered and that the pyramids used to be called the Shining Pyramids. The southern and the regular, the Shining Pyramid and the southern Shining Pyramid. That blew me away because that showed me that the Egyptians understood chemistry.
Yeah.
But let me blow your mind even more. Do you know what the Egyptian word for Egypt is?
No.
It's Kemet. I'm sure you've heard of that. But they called Egypt Kemet. Which is the root word for chemistry and alchemy. Which is like... Okay, so why would they have been called that by foreigners?
Right.
Because they had some sort of deep, profound knowledge of changing material from one thing to another and mixing materials together. And so now you kind of have to give Egypt all kinds of credit because they were mixing stuff. I mean, they were performing all the kinds of magic that even... if you will, biblical texts talk about like Pharaoh's acolytes and stuff, that they were able to
Their miracle
do these.
workers,
Yeah, these magicians were able to mix things and actually
Right.
match the power of the staff of Moses
Right.
and whatnot. Now, of course, I don't know how much is in there,
A lot
but
of
the fact
lost in
that
translation.
right, but the fact that the Israelites or Jews or Hebrews, whatever you want to call them, went back and like wrote that,
Right.
yes, in Egypt land, they have so much magic going on.
It had to have been noteworthy enough for them to write it down.
Right, and it's kind of like a mythology of it.
Right.
Like they're so powerful that like they can actually match the power of God in a lot of cases.
It's just so cool.
Yeah, right, and in minute things and stuff, but still noteworthy. And so that those two things were like the first couple days in Egypt. So like my mind was blown instantly. Like I had no reason to think that the rest of this trip would be like just some kind of lame tour.
Right.
Like the whole thing was super cool. And we haven't even left Cairo yet for the first time. But I came up with another interesting idea, right? And this isn't necessarily my own idea either, right? But I've kind of accumulated a lot of different things, and this is headcanon for me. This is what makes sense, right? If we assume, this is a big assumption, that the pyramids are much older than we've been told, and I'm talking pre-Younger Dryas impact, so pre 12,800 years ago, so older than 12,800 years. Now hear me out.
It's pretty old.
Yes, extraordinarily old.
Right.
This would require massive amounts of evidence to support my hypothesis here. Right. The pyramids are scale models of the Earth. Right. The dimensions of the pyramids, right, are the art of squaring the circle or sacred geometry. Right.
Oh, okay. I see where you're going.
And so this is not something that I've come up with.
Right.
Isaac Newton was talking about this. People say Leonardo da Vinci was talking about this, and that's how he created the Vitruvian Man. Right. And so the idea is that if you took the pyramid and mirror imaged it upon itself at the base, you would form a diamond, right? An 8-sided diamond. And with that, you could put a sphere around it, right? And that sphere's circumference, diameter would be a scale model of the Earth. Now, that was just talking about the Great Pyramid. The other two pyramids are of lesser scale on the Earth, right? And Muhammad brought up the idea. Now, I don't know if this was his original idea or if this is someone else's study, that the pyramids, if they were in their completed state, because of their scale size and whatnot, they would have a particular resonance, right? Whether it be 432 hertz, things like that, that match certain vibrations that are considered sacred or holy, right? The number 432 is like a big number in sacred geometry. Well, we know that the pyramids at points in history were used as healing centers. Now, this is by the dynastic, so I don't know if we can even project what the dynastic Egyptians were doing onto these, very, very ancient, archaic, prehistoric, if you will, people. But if they were truly used as healing sites by the dynastic Egyptians, because they may have been more selfish, thinking, these vibrations only heal humans, right? And remember, when the Egyptians got there, the pyramids were basically collapsing.
Right. They were already ancient.
Right. We know, now this is where I come in. We know that playing music next to plants actually helps them grow because frequencies, resonance, all that jazz, right? Vibrations. That was like a huge word on this tour that I kind of got tired of hearing was vibrations, but it was like we had buzzwords on the trip, but they always did connect to what we were doing. Right. And so, as funny or annoying as it could be, it was quite serious. The pyramids vibrate at a certain frequency, and the Egyptians used it for healing. if when the pyramids were at their well-kept state, their original state, their perfect state, would they not, and because they're scale models of the Earth, would they not have been providing a frequency that would have kept the Sahara green? And then when some cataclysm came from extraterrestrial origin, I'm not talking about aliens, I'm talking about rocks falling from space. Let's be clear.
Ancient astronaut theorists predict.
As ancient astronaut theorists contend. I wish I had that man's voice. But at any rate, I just had this wild idea that, because the ancient world's so much better than us and they were at peace and harmony with the world and things, that if I went along that line, that the pyramids served as rather large tuning forks that when at their peak, not literal peak, but at their prime, construction.
Their prime state.
Yeah, their prime state, that they would have emitted a frequency that's resonance would have kept the Sahara green. And when they fell into disrepair because of the great cataclysm known as the Younger Dryas impact, that they fell into disrepair, and that obviously because no one was there to take care of them because everyone died. You know, the great bottlenecking. The same thing happened at Göbekli Tepe, right? But that was deliberately buried. It's a whole nother story. I was in Egypt. I wasn't in Turkey, right? And so with people not being there, right, all the ancient sites, the ones that are made out of granite and diorite and basalt and stuff, when they fell into disrepair because no one was there, they lost their power, right? And so the Sahara becomes... Now, obviously, environmental changes happen too,
right?
But the resistance that the pyramids could have put up for that, which explains to me why we find such extreme ecosystems where pyramids are in the world, like rainforest, the Amazon rainforest,
and where early people are too.
Right, and like shit just keeps getting older, right? But that was a thought I had on the pyramids.
That's a hot take.
Right, and so with the Younger Dryas, that massive cataclysm, right? People were bottlenecked down to maybe only a few dozen bands of 150 or fewer people. That's where all of our genetic information today, all over the world, comes from. Maybe with the exclusion of Aboriginals and of Australia and of Southern Africa and things like that. But
Sub-Saharan.
Well, the effects actually go beyond the Sahara. Whatever, talking about Egypt today, but sub-Saharan Africa really didn't experience much, and I doubt much of South America really experienced that much either. In terms of the megafaunal extinction that occurred after. But yeah, so without humans to maintain Egypt, as it were, everything falls into disrepair, and then many thousands of years later, or maybe even a couple hundred. I mean, I'm sure there were hunter-gatherer groups that went around that were more primitive, that brought these pots and vases and all this stuff that they find now, and they're like, oh, these are only 7,000 or 8,000 years old. Because some random group came up, and because what you see on these pots and stuff are depictions of the pyramids 8,000 years ago.
How would they have known if they are only so many thousand years
old? It's not like they just drew triangles and it's just a triangle. It's a triangle with blocks painted on it. And the Egyptian, Department of Antiquities and the German Archaeological Institute and the Swiss Archaeological Institute and so on and so forth from all around the world, they're dating these pot shards and stuff and an actual full-scale pots.
Right.
They're dating them at pre-dynastic periods, so older than, 5,000 years. And it's like, so who built the freaking pyramids,
It's amazing that throughout all of history, the pyramids have been such an object of fascination and we still don't know everything there is to know.
Oh, yeah, there's no way.
It's amazing.
I am almost certain that we will never know how they did it.
Right.
I mean, because the common phrase is, we can't even do that today.
With modern machining and tools.
I'm sure we
could,
do some.
But the scale is still mind-boggling, even with our technology today. It's absolutely crazy to think about that people without high-tech machinery, precise machining, these fantastic tools and cranes.
Don't get me started on the circular saw blade striations that you can see things, and borehole striations.
Oh yeah, that picture you showed me, that was very interesting.
Oh, it's way more than just that. I mean, there's dozens and dozens of these things where clearly they were using some sort of tool.
Right.
And another thought I had was these are all in pre-dynastic, what we would consider pre-dynastic stones, right? Because we assume everything made out of granite was made by the pre-Younger Dryas impact people, right? So where are these tools? Where are the tools? Honestly, I have no idea what they did. If I want to project our modern machining on them, I would say now I understand that gold is very soft and silver is quite soft too, compared to some of these stones. Diamond, it could have been used. But I'm thinking, how do I put this? I'm sure their tools were made out of materials that later people thought were precious materials, so they got taken and melted down rather quickly.
I would say that's a fair assumption.
Because the amount of tools that we find in Egypt, like unique tools made out of different materials and stuff, not like you could find thousands of like steel hose or iron hose or stone hose or something like that. But the amount of different tools basically can be fit in a box. And like they're like copper tools and like just really weak stuff, right? But if you will, I think that they were made out of precious metal material that another civilization, when they came by, they were like, "Oh crap! Look at all this gold. Yeah. This is cool. Let's use it for stuff like decorating
headdress."
Headdress or decorating for Pharaoh because we don't know what to do with it.
It's shiny.
But I was also wondering, because we were talking about frequencies and things like that, if somehow they were using sounds to move blocks. But I forget how I wrote this down, but my thought was I don't even want to say it without actually having the writing down in front of me. Because I thought I wrote it down in a decent way.
I mean that's been something that's been posited though is using sounds and certain frequencies to move objects. Not like levitating them, but to get them to move. Right.
I was just thinking that maybe it was a comment that I made on Instagram, which will be impossible to find. I really wish I would have written it down.
When in doubt, write it out.
Yeah, I should have written it down because I cannot find it now. But I think we have missed the time frame. Like, not only did they have technologies that we don't really understand, but there also may have been a physical phenomenon that was possible on Earth 10, 12, 13,000 years ago that we just don't have the ability to do now. I'm not talking about like stone giants and stuff. I'm talking about frequencies or things like that would have actually assisted in the moving of this. I wish I would have written that down, so sorry for the long pause. But no, so those are the three main things that really like wowed me. I mean, obviously you have the Sphinx, which, I mean, the Sphinx enclosure itself is under much scrutiny and debate for its current dating.
Well, it's my understanding that it was moved not all that long ago as well. It was in place, but it was partially buried, so they decided to move it.
I didn't hear that it was moved, but I've also not paid any attention to it. I mean, you're the one that watched the documentary. Not me. I was just there.
I think it was in the 80s or the 90s that they moved, like they disassembled it and moved it and then reassembled it. because it was in danger of being because the Nile floods or something like that. I'd have to go back and read, but they had moved it.
Yeah, I mean, when we went down to Aswan, where all the quarries are, I mean, we saw massive, like the unfinished obelisk, this massive 100-something foot long obelisk weighing many tons, and another instance of chemistry or alchemy, or specifically chemistry being used, is that there's like these stone. The stone obviously is what it's being cut out of. It's the same material, but the removed portions appear as if they were scooped out in one go, one single scoop.
Right.
And so it was really strange. My thought was it was a powdered chemical that would have been, the water would have been a catalyst to make it start melting limestone. But I have no idea. What, I'm not a chemist. I can't.
Not an expert.
Yeah, I don't know what melts limestone. I don't know what melts quartz.
Right.
Or granite, rather.
Right. So,
yeah. But overall, I mean, we went to some really, really fun places in Aswan and in Luxor. But yeah, those were the three main that stuck out to me, and those are the three main things that I'll be mentioning in the Megalithic Marvels podcast. I just hope...
A little sneak peek there.
Yeah, I just hope that the podcast goes really well tomorrow, and that maybe our channel...
hopefully this takes off too. That'd be nice.
Yeah, so I mean, I might give it a shout out, but without any content put out, 24 hours before, I doubt anyone would find it. So maybe I'll have to have Derek
just mention, hey, Buddy and I are starting up a podcast.
Yeah, because of this trip, honestly, it was like on the trip that I was like, dude, we got to start our own. So
I mean, we already have a podcast out there. Shout out to that one.
I don't know if I'll name it or not. Name drop. But yeah, so all right, I think we just hit 42 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, do you have any questions for me on any?
I don't. I think I'm so mad at myself. I'm still kicking myself that I wasn't able to go.
I'll go again just to make sure that you get to go.
Because it's something that we've always talked about, traveling and seeing stuff like this. Well,
the great thing about Egypt is that you can fly into Cairo. You don't have to have a tour guide. Right. Because the pyramids and all that stuff is literally just outside of Cairo. I mean, if you want, you can maybe find somebody prior to that's willing to drive you around for a few days. But everything else there is just a taxi or an Uber drive away. And the economy there isn't so great right now. And so it's kind of like it behooves us to go because we can spend...
Our money is
good. Yeah, let's just put it like that. And then you can fly from Cairo to Luxor. And from Luxor, you can basically go anywhere. I mean, there's a vast array of things that you can do in Luxor. And
there are lots of different sites, too, that are...
Oh, I mean, we went to well over a dozen sites, and we got exclusive access to almost every single one of them. I mean, obviously, our first day at Giza was just like the wow day. Just let it all soak in, get all your oohs and ahs out, because then we're going to go to work, and we're going to start looking for information pertinent to Younger Dryas and
what they're there to look
prehistoric Egypt, if you will, pre-dynastic Egypt. But yeah, I mean, I loved going. The whole group was nice. Nobody fought. Everyone had a great time. We all got along. I mean, apparently they've had smaller groups that have had issues.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but everything was taken care of. Yeah. All of our meals, every aspect of the trip was pre-planned, taken care of, and it was paid for by our admission. Yeah. So it wasn't like you just kept having to constantly throw extra money at them. The only thing I think we had to pay for were our drinks at every place, because you could pay for the meal, but the drinks are basically on you, what you want and stuff. So,
but that's one of those things where you can.
I mean, a can of pop. Now I just co-located us. If you're trying to triangulate us
soda,
based off of
pop,
our
Coke.
accent, soda, pop, Coke, Pepsi. soda pop, soft drink.
Soft.
A can cost like $1. So,
wow.
And this is at restaurants. So, the only thing expensive over there is alcohol because they don't brew their own. I mean, they don't.
Well, it's predominantly Muslim.
Yes, the Islamic world doesn't drink alcohol all that much. I don't know if it's like 0% at all, but so a lot of it's just imported stuff. But I mean, I wasn't there to get wasted because we had to wake up at like 4 a.m. most days and stuff just to try to beat a little bit of the heat. But we were out every day until 5, 6 o'clock in the afternoon. So
that is just amazing.
Yeah,
I just want to go.
What I was saying, I kind of interrupted myself, but you don't have to go on a tour to go to Egypt because so many things are within arm's reach because everything is right there on the Nile. Like they can't just do stuff in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
Everything was always connected to the Nile.
And that's something that we were talking about earlier before we started recording was just that
the greenery.
Yeah, the conception is that the pyramids are in the middle of the desert, but really they're a stone's throw away from the Nile, where everyone lives. And Egypt is a bustling, growing, large population country. I mean, it's amazing.
I think Cairo is one of the most densely populated cities in the world.
Yes.
I forget what the number is.
I don't know what.
It's like 25 million, I think.
But there are a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
Yeah. We went through the Cairo market on a Friday, which is like their Sunday. So it was basically the equivalent of the white man after church rush to a Mexican restaurant. Was basically the Cairo market scene.
That is such an elaborate and accurate way of putting that. Every Sunday around here, every white guy and their whole family and all the old people are out.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to go to Applebee's. That's just hilarious.
Yeah, but it was specifically for me. I was like, man, this is like the white people rush to the Mexican restaurants after church. I was like, this is awesome, though. I mean, it was so cool because you were like shoulder to shoulder with a bunch of people and stuff. And I remembered some Arabic from my time in the army, but also I like would Google Translate stuff and just try to remember that phrase. And I created like a little table for people to say like shukran and stuff like thank you and like assalamu alaikum and
alaikum salam.
Hey, there you go. But yeah, just because it would be fun to at least say a few nice things in their language. It's like a courtesy. You're in their country, so you can at least try. But
you can at least try.
And they look at you differently. Like especially like I was riding the camel in Cairo on like the first day or whatever, and I saw a couple guys like walking up, and they were like looking at us, and I said assalamu alaikum, and they were like. Alaikum salam. They were just,
I didn't expect that from white boy.
Well, I was asked twice in Egypt if I was Muslim because of it's peace be upon you. You know, it's kind of a religious way of saying hello. But all right. On that note, next week, join us next week for sure, or next episode. Rather, I don't know when we're going to record the next.
We're still working out the logistics of scheduling.
Yeah. But the next episode is going to be really awesome. We're going to be talking about manuscript 512.
Very interesting.
Totally unrelated to Egypt, but it relates to ancient sites. So,
and maybe some sacred geometry.
We'll find out. Come join us next episode on Histographia.